Was the original purpose to make these artifacts and these documents and these manuscripts available to whoever wanted to make use of them?
They said it finally happened. A sealed Vatican archive, a hidden collection tied directly to Jesus. And online, the reaction was not celebration, but panic. Scholars, historians, believers, everyone leaning in at once. But here's the catch. When something this serious happens, it leaves dates, documents, and paper trails. So, did you see this headline too? Would you trust YouTube buzz over Vatican records? And if this was real, why did it spread so fast? And where did it actually come from? The viral claim, what the internet says, was opened. The story didn't come from Rome, it came from the algorithm. Scroll for 5 minutes and you'll hear the same confident line dressed up in different thumbnails. The Vatican opened a sealed archive about Jesus. Sometimes it's framed like a movie trailer, with chanting choir music and a dusty key turning in a lock. Other times it's delivered like breaking news, as if scholars ran out of a library yelling, "We can't unsee it." But when you slow the tape down and listen to what these videos actually claim, the details start wobbling. They'll say there were Vatican vaults that stayed shut for centuries, and that a specific collection tied to Jesus was finally unsealed. They'll mention sealed drawers and forbidden shelves, like there's a labeled folder that literally reads, "Jesus, the Truth." They'll hint at ancient Jesus documents that would shake Christianity, rewrite history, expose Rome, and pick your flavor. Here's what they almost never show you. An actual document on screen with a catalogue number. A date, a photographed page, a scholar's name who's willing to put their reputation on the line. It's always experts say, insiders claim, or historians are panicking. But no one is quoted, no one is identified, and no one seems reachable outside the comment section. And that's where the credibility camouflage comes in. It's the same trick magic shows use. Distract with glitter, then swap the card quietly. Because the Vatican does have an archive, and it's real, and it is enormous. People love repeating that it stretches for about 85 kilometers of shelving if you lined it all up, and that it includes secure storage areas that feel more like a bunker than a library. That kind of detail is catnip for the internet, because it sounds like proof. It creates the feeling that the rumor must be true because the place is mysterious. But notice what just happened. A real institution with real scale gets used like a costume. The size of the archive becomes the evidence for a claim. The video still hasn't been sourced. Another trick is the word sealed. In these clips, sealed usually means hidden from the public, which sounds dramatic, but archives are often restricted for boring reasons: conservation, privacy, and rules about who can access what. The Vatican Apostolic Archive, which some people still call the Vatican Secret Archives, has a process. Researchers apply, they work in supervised reading rooms, they request items, they cite what they use. It's paperwork, not a torchlit heist. So let me ask you something. If the Vatican truly opened a sealed section directly tied to Jesus, wouldn't there be an official announcement with a clear date? Wouldn't historians you can actually Google be talking about it on record? And why do you think these videos never show documents on screen, even blurred, even partial? Because here's the pattern. The story borrows real facts to feel solid, then floats a much bigger claim on top of them, like a crown on fog. And if scholars were genuinely panicking, wouldn't we hear something from at least one of them, somewhere, in a way that isn't just a voiceover and a dramatic soundtrack? So let's stop letting YouTube narrate the Vatican to us and ask the Vatican itself. What is actually inside these archives? Inside the Vatican archives, what they really contain. Not forbidden gospels, but bureaucracy, history, and millions of pages. The Vatican Apostolic Archive is not one spooky vault where a single iron door swings open and everyone gasps. It is a living system, quiet and regulated, more like a hospital for paper than a movie set. And honestly, that's what makes it powerful, because when a place is built to preserve memory for centuries, it does not need theatrics. It just needs rules. Start with the basics that people skip. This archive holds the documentary heritage of the Holy See across roughly 12 centuries, from around the 8th century up through the 20th century. That alone should set off a little alarm in your head, in a good way. If the holdings begin in the 8th century, then no, this is not a closet full of 1st century eyewitness diaries waiting for a YouTuber to crack the code. It's a record of how an institution ran, negotiated, argued, governed, and survived. And it is huge. The archive's holdings stretch across more than 85 kilometers of shelving. Imagine a single hallway of documents that runs longer than a marathon, then multiply it until your brain gets tired and gives up. That scale is why rumors love this place. Size feels like secrecy, even when it's just storage. Now, let's talk about the part that rumor videos always mention with a dramatic whisper: the bunker. Yes, there is an underground bunker and storage vaults designed for preservation. It's a reinforced, fire-resistant structure under the Vatican Museum's area known as the Cortile della Pigna, built to protect paper from the things that destroy paper: fire, humidity, time, and human carelessness. It has high-density shelving systems, controlled spaces, and the kind of planning that screams, "We are thinking in centuries." That is not a conspiracy. That is conservation. Here's the key point, though. A bunker does not automatically equal a secret stash of Jesus documents. Most of what's stored there is administrative history, correspondence, and official records arranged into hundreds of archival collections. It's less forbidden gospel and more the world's most intense filing system. Now, access. This is where the internet's sealed language gets messy. The archives are open to qualified researchers, not to the general public. You do not walk in on a casual Tuesday because you feel curious. You apply. You submit credentials. If you are clergy, there are degree requirements too. And even then, there is a cap. A maximum of about 60 researchers can be admitted to the study rooms each day. 60. That's not a stampede. That's a controlled reading room with limits, because fragile documents and crowds do not mix. So let me ask you this. Does limited access automatically mean secrecy, or can it simply mean protection? Would you trust delicate, centuries-old documents to mass exposure and phone cameras flashing every 2 seconds? And if scholars were supposedly panicking, wouldn't we see at least one named historian attaching their name to the claim? This is the part rumor videos never say out loud. Nothing about Jesus' lifetime is being newly unsealed here, because this archive is not a time capsule from the 1st century waiting for a grand opening. The Vatican's archive is vast and fascinating, but it is vast in the way governments are vast. It tells you how power moved, how decisions were recorded, how conflicts were documented, and how history got filed. So, if nothing about Jesus was suddenly opened, why do people keep pointing to sealed Vatican archives in the first place? The sealing confusion. Holy doors versus hidden documents. Because something was sealed, but not what you think. In January 2026, the Vatican sealed something in full public view. Cameras rolling, crowds watching, a pope at the center of it. And if you only caught the clips out of context, it looks exactly like the kind of "they closed the truth again" moment the internet loves to remix. Here's what actually happened. The Catholic Church has a jubilee, also called a Holy Year. And one of the most famous rituals is the Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica. It is normally closed, and during a jubilee it is opened as a public symbol. People pass through it as a sign of renewal, forgiveness, and a fresh start. It is not a secret door. It is not a hidden vault. It is a very visible piece of symbolism that's designed to be seen. And on January the 6th, 2026, the Vatican closed that Holy Door to formally end the Holy Year. The sealing is ceremonial. And it is dramatic in a way that almost dares the algorithm to misread it. A massive door, a final passage, a closing act, and then the word sealed gets repeated in headlines because it fits the moment. Now think about how the internet works. You see Vatican and sealed in the same sentence, and your brain starts reaching for the darkest drawer in the story cabinet. Then someone adds archive, because sealed archive sounds more explosive than closed ceremonial door. Then someone adds Jesus, because nothing travels faster than a claim tied to Jesus, especially if it hints at suppressed history. This is where the confusion turns into fuel. Religious language is often symbolic, but online it gets treated like literal action. Opened becomes unlocked. Sealed becomes hidden. Holy door becomes secret door. And suddenly, you have a story that feels like a breaking news thriller, even though it began as a public religious ritual. Here's the fresh insight that matters. The myth doesn't need a real document to spread. It just needs words that can be misunderstood on purpose. Algorithms reward intensity, not accuracy. A clip of a door being sealed will always beat a calm explanation of archive policies. One gets shared with a gasp. The other gets saved for later and is never watched. And there's one more layer that makes this even easier to twist. In 2019, Pope Francis changed the name of what many people used to call the Vatican Secret Archives, and it became the Vatican Apostolic Archives. That name change happened partly because the word secret in modern English sounds like conspiracy, even when the older meaning is closer to private or official. So now the internet has two separate ingredients. It can blend into one smoothie of confusion. A sealed holy door on camera and the idea of secret archives in the background. So let me ask you, have you ever seen religious symbolism mistaken for literal action before and then spread like it was a confirmed event? Why do you think dramatic rituals travel faster than boring facts? And if this was truly about hidden Jesus documents, why would the strongest visual evidence be a church door being closed in public? Once you see the mix-up, you start to notice how easily language can be weaponized. Not by villains in robes, but by thumbnails, captions, and confident voiceovers that never pause to ask, wait, sealed what exactly? But wait, haven't Vatican archives actually been opened before? Yes, and that's where the real story lives. So, are you ready to follow the paper trail instead of the hype? The real openings. What scholars actually care about. Real openings don't shock. They reshape history quietly. When the Vatican opens its archives, it doesn't come with thunder, smoke, or a dramatic reveal. It comes with calendars, catalogue numbers, and a long line of scholars who know this work takes years, not minutes. And in March 2020, one of the most important archive openings in modern Vatican history happened almost exactly that way. The Vatican opened the archives of Pope Pius XII, covering his entire papacy from 1939 to 1958. This was not a small move. Pius XII led the Church during World War II, during the Holocaust, and during some of the most morally charged years of the 20th century. For decades, historians debated his role. Was he silent? Was he diplomatic? Was he complicit, cautious, or quietly strategic? Those questions mattered, and they still do. So, when these archives opened, scholars paid attention, not YouTube commentators, not thumbnail designers, actual historians who had spent years preparing research questions and learning how Vatican records work. Thousands of files became available: diplomatic correspondence, internal memos, letters between church officials and governments, evidence that could support or challenge long-standing arguments. And here's the important part: nobody panicked. There were no viral clips of scholars storming out of reading rooms, no whispers of forbidden truths leaking online. What followed instead were careful studies, slow publications, and nuanced debates. Some findings complicated earlier narratives. Others confirmed what was already suspected. That's how real history moves. It inches forward, footnote by footnote. Notice what was missing from all of this. There was no material about Jesus' lifetime, no explosive first-century revelations, no documents that rewrote the Gospels, and no claims that Christianity itself was about to collapse, because that was never the point of this opening. This is what gets lost in internet retellings. When the Vatican opens archives, it is usually about institutional history, not divine secrets. It's about how the Church operated in specific political moments, how it negotiated power, and how it recorded its own decisions. Scholars care because these details shape how we understand responsibility, influence, and memory. Compare that to how these events get translated online. A careful archive opening becomes Vatican reveals hidden truth. Years of preparation become sudden shock. Academic debate becomes panic. The slow burn of scholarship doesn't fit the rhythm of the algorithm, so it gets replaced with something louder. Let me ask you something. Why do slow truths feel less exciting than sudden revelations, even when they matter more? And should history be revealed carefully, with context and restraint, or dramatically, in a way that guarantees attention? There's also a trust issue hiding underneath all this. Scholars trust systems. They trust catalogues, preservation rules, and peer review. The internet often trusts vibes. If something feels secret, it must be important. If it's quiet, it must be hiding something. That gap is where myths thrive. The irony is that the Vatican has shown what real openness looks like. It announces archive openings years in advance. It sets rules. It lets researchers in. And then it steps back while the work happens. That process is not flashy, but it's accountable. So, when you hear claims that scholars are panicking over newly opened archives about Jesus, it's worth remembering what actually caused waves in the academic world. It wasn't a sealed drawer being cracked open. It was boxes of paperwork, patiently studied, changing how we understand a painful chapter of modern history. Which brings us to the final turn. If scholars weren't panicking and the Vatican wasn't hiding a Jesus archive, then who exactly was panicking in this story? And why did it feel so real? The real panic: algorithms, faith, and the hunger for secrets. The panic wasn't academic. It was digital. Every generation waits for a final revelation. A document that changes everything. A page that settles belief once and for all. Something solid enough to end doubt and dramatic enough to feel earned. And when institutions move slowly, when answers take years instead of minutes, the internet does what it always does. It fills the silence. This is why stories about Jesus travel faster than almost anything else online. Jesus sits at the center of faith, history, power, and identity all at once. Add mystery, add authority like the Vatican, and suddenly you have the perfect viral engine. It feels important before it is proven. It feels urgent before it is verified. And the algorithms know this. They do not care whether a claim is careful. They care whether it keeps you watching. A headline that says, "Scholars review newly catalogued Vatican materials," dies quietly. A headline that says, "The Vatican opened a sealed archive on Jesus," explodes. Same setting, same institution, completely different emotional payoff. What gets framed as panic is usually something else entirely. It is discomfort with uncertainty. It is frustration with slow answers. It is distrust of institutions that speak in footnotes instead of sound bites. When people feel locked out of knowledge, they start to imagine what must be hidden inside. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Even if a definitive document existed, a single page that proved everything beyond doubt, it would not land the way people expect. It would be debated, contextualized, challenged, and reinterpreted. History does not end with a reveal. It begins with arguments. That is why the idea of a sealed Jesus archive feels so powerful. It promises closure. It promises certainty. It promises that belief could finally rest on something physical you could point to and say, "There it is." But belief does not work like that, and neither does serious history. So let me ask you something personal. Why do we crave secrets more than understanding? Would definitive proof actually strengthen faith, or would it strip faith of the very tension that gives it meaning? And when a story feels too perfect, too cinematic, do you pause, or do you hit share? This is where our role, and your role as a viewer, really matters. Curiosity without discipline turns into rumor. Discipline without curiosity turns into gatekeeping. The sweet spot lives in between. Ask hard questions, but demand real sources. Stay open, but stay grounded. The Vatican Apostolic Archive is not a treasure chest of forbidden truths. It is a record of an institution trying to remember itself across centuries. The real story here is not about a door being opened or sealed. It is about how easily symbolic language can be mistaken for literal action, and how quickly that mistake can become a global narrative. If there was panic in this story, it wasn't coming from scholars hunched over manuscripts. It was coming from timelines, thumbnails, and the pressure to turn complexity into a plot twist. That panic says more about us than it does about Rome. So, if no sealed archive on Jesus was opened and no scholars were panicking, what should we actually take away from this story? The truth is slower than the myth. The Vatican did not open a sealed archive on Jesus, and scholars are not panicking behind stone walls in Rome. But something else is happening right in front of us. A quiet tug-of-war between truth and virality, between patience and spectacle. So, the next time a headline promises a hidden gospel, pause for a second. Is this history speaking, or is the algorithm shouting? Do you think truth needs mystery to survive? Should archives be more open or more protected? Did this change how you see Vatican's secrets? If it did, like the video, subscribe and stay curious.